the right policy for Britain?
Well, Gerard, what I would say is immigration is simply too high at the moment. It has been these last 10 years, and it does need to come down.
You talked about a fair, workable immigration system. That's exactly what I want.
But it was a question on funding law and order that drew the first real dramatic exchanges.
Will you continue to fund the police?
Yes, of course, but Gordon, let me give you an example.
Will you match our funding on the police? The answer is no from your manifesto.
Let me give you a very good example.
This is not question time.
Let Mr Cameron answer your point, Mr Brown.
It's answer time, David.
What matters is what comes out.
And there were terse words over the question of party funding and the scandal of MPs' expenses.
And yes, the Liberal Democrats took £2.5 million off someone who's still, I think, a criminal on the run, and the money hasn't been paid back. So let's not get too heavy than now over all this.
Nick Clegg.
Hang on a minute. Before we bandy about these things, let's be absolutely clear. We were completely exonerated for that. It was years ago. I'm talking about what's been going on now.
Have you paid the money back?
And listen, none of this is going to make any difference if we allow this rotten system in Westminster to carry on.
There were questions too on health, armed services equipment and the UK's massive debt. All the leaders will think they've done well. On the instant polls, each rated differently. What is clear, no one lost it on this performance. Alan Fisher, Aljazeera, London.
Well, joining me in the studio now to discuss how the party leaders did is Professor of Government at London Metropolitan University, Stephen Hazler, and an expert in charisma and confidence, Nikki Owen. So, Stephen, let's get away from charisma for the moment before we come to Nikki. Who won, do you think, politically?
Oh, politically, I think the punches were landed basically by Brown and Clegg. And Brown's punch was the fact that he was constantly kept to a theme, kept to a basic message about unemployment and so on and so forth. A little boring, continually referring back to what the message he wants to get through. He landed a few punches on Cameron. Clegg, I think, was good because notice how many times he used the word honesty in this debate. He never stopped talking about honesty. And he's got that sort of kind of honest face, and he's got that honest persona. And so I think they got their messages across. Brown's message was basically to say Cameron would increase unemployment. Clegg's message was to say, I'm an honest guy, these two are crooks. And Cameron, I think, didn't get a message across. And I think in that sense, I think I'd say those two were the winners.
OK. Nikki?
I absolutely thought that the night was owned by Nick Clegg. He was a man of the people. His postures and gestures were really open. He used people's names. When he actually responded to the questions, he actually looked at them rather than this kind of mass sweeping, which, you know, I think worked really, really well. And he just felt more relaxed to me. He just kind of shone.
And is that because he had least to lose?
I think that's probably, to a certain extent, correct. Yet he absolutely looked like he was enjoying it. When he first started,
he doesn't get much chance to get on television, does he?
True. When he first started, though, it was almost like he was kind of nervous because there was a bit of a choked-upness in his throat, right. And he was kind of a bit squeaky. Though as he relaxed into it, his voice lowered a bit, and he was absolutely articulate and very feeling.
All right,
emotive.
well, OK, well, you've laid out your story. I'll come back to Stephen in a moment politically, but I want you to tell me who you think has the most charisma and whether or not that's important.
I believe it does. I was a little bit disappointed in all of them tonight because I think there were touches of charisma in Nick Clegg. Gordon Brown, for me, has loads and loads of gravitas. He's got that
because he's in office.
No, because he's got a very commanding voice tonality. He's got a very deep voice. So in comparison to the other two, he automatically had a commanding presence on that stage. The big disappointment for me tonight was David Cameron. He looked so nervous.
Right, so sack his media trainer and give a tip to the other two. Stephen, does an event like this create more interest in politics? Because that's the most important, perhaps, angle, because of the numbers voting.
Oh, I think it creates an interest in politics, and I think you've got a horse race between...
We're looking at David Cameron now.
Yeah, a horse race between individuals creates an interest. But ultimately, I don't think it deals with what people are going to be thinking on election voting eve, which is about the big stuff, my job, my education, my health. They're going to come back to that. This was a chance, I think, for one of the leaders to make a breakthrough And I'm afraid that was not, they did not succeed. Clegg did, but Clegg is not really in this contest.
OK, is personality the same as performance, Nikki?
I think that the important thing for politicians is that they come across as trustworthy and honest, especially with everything that's happened. And I felt a bit with Gordon Brown tonight and also with David Cameron. They were too many contrived gestures. What's all this sort of stuff about?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, is it a secret code or something? So for me, it's about a politician, regardless of their personality, that actually has the courage and the guts to speak from the heart.
Stephen, is this soundbite television, is it relevant? We're looking at the debate again, but I mean, we can't hear what they're saying, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But is this soundbite television? And one of the best comments I heard today was from a makeup artist who said they should be legally bound if they make a promise. And they've made lots of promises tonight, haven't they?
Yeah, they made lots of promises. The thing in this is for somebody to engage in a knockout punch, which people remember for the rest of the campaign. A phrase, a turn of phrase that they remember. We didn't have any of those tonight. So what it amounts to is that Gordon Brown, who people thought was pretty awful at this, has done okay because he's done better than they thought he'd do. Clegg, who they didn't know, comes over as a refreshing, as Nikki's arguing, has got his personality in the campaign. David Cameron has not done much, in my view. But I think it is, they've got to make, you can use a soundbite to make a knockout punch. Ronald Reagan did it.
Yeah.
And they didn't use it. I mean, there was a funny time when Gordon Brown, the only time the audience laughed, of course, when Gordon Brown talked about his face all over the place, put there by Cameron. But there was nothing that anyone's going to remember about this apart from their personalities.
Well, that's a shame, isn't it, politically? I mean, can you name 3 important political points they made this debate?
Nothing that sticks in my mind. I mean, they made them, but they didn't make them in an alluring, attractive, lasting way, which is the skill of the politician and the statesman. That's what they should do.
And that is the reason why being charismatic, like Barack Obama, actually does really leverage public opinion. And I have to say, on the opening, when we saw David Cameron standing there, he had his chin up, he was almost kind of like a regal, almost above it all, and I just would love to get hold of him and just say, just loosen up a little bit, just kind of relax and stop being so perfect. What people want is a man that speaks from the heart.
Do these debates serve any useful purpose? I want to go back to the great story which you both know about Nixon and Kennedy.
Yes, well,
Nixon lost it on the night because he refused to have makeup and he was sweating. But on radio, he won it.
I listened to it on radio. And I thought he'd won it, hands down. His voice was better than Kennedy's. Kennedy's was high, your point. When the minute you saw
and that's the first judging by television.
Yes, but again, I don't really think it had an effect, actually.
Well, I have to say that 55% of communication is judged on what we see. 93% is judged on non-verbal communication. So if you're actually applying that to tonight's debate, only 7% of what was said tonight, the content, is actually going to be absorbed. And that's actually quite sad, which is why tonight, I believe, was so crucial for those 3 guys up there.
And we've got 2 more to go.
We have. I wonder if they'll be a little easier, and they might debate amongst each other. I wanted to see a few sparks fly, frankly.
Well, that's the problem. That was a question I was going to ask. But perhaps I'll ask you to next time at the next debate, because I think there are too many rules governing this debate. Before we went on air, the Conservatives were on 35%, according to Comres, Labour on 29%, and Lib Dems 21%. What we'll try and do is bring you the latest polls after the debate. We'll also have extensive coverage, of course, of the entire British election on Aljazeera's website. And if you want more details, and hopefully you'll update it with the polls we're using, go to interactive.aljazeera.net/UK elections. There you'll find profiles of the main party leaders and the other parties, all of which are in the running. And the next 2 debates we'll also be covering on Al Jazeera. For the moment, Stephen Hazelaw and Nikki Owen, thank you both very much indeed for sitting through the 90 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks.
I'm going to take you to the US.